Uh, there are very few films in my journey as a journalist that I've watched and have left me completely numb. I think one recent one is Kesari Chapter Two, and I was expecting to definitely feel that when I saw the trailer, and rightly so because the subject is as such, where it talks about the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre, which was a ghastly act by the British Empire, and it's incredible how our guest today, Karan Tyagi, who is the debut director of the film, has made such a masterpiece of a film. And I think we're very lucky and fortunate to have him on our platform. So thank you so much, Karan, for joining us, and congratulations on Kesari Chapter 2.
Thank you so much, Anuj. I'm so happy that you like the film. It means the world to me. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, look, Karan, look, as I mentioned earlier, I mean, Jallianwala Bagh, it's such a it's a sensitive subject in the sense because obviously it's very there's a lot of emotions that stir even today when we reflect back on it. Um, and obviously this is your first film stepping into the director's seat. I mean, such big responsibilities on your shoulders. How did you, was there actually, I would say, an apprehension on your part before of actually coming on board for Casey Chapter 2? And what do you think gave you that sense of focus, I think, in terms of making sure that this story is told in a very sensitive and a very human manner in which you have done so?
So Anuj, there was no apprehension on my part. This was a story that I wanted to tell the world. And so to trace back the journey of this film, so a friend of mine gave me this book called A Case That Shook the Empire. And when I read the book, it was a riveting read. And it sort of told me something very shocking and very new. It it kind of told me, see, everyone knows about the Jallianwala Bagh massacre, but what the book kind of, I was reading something very new in the book, that the massacre was planned down to the T. That
Mm,
everything was planned. That there was an aircraft that flew to detect whether enough people had assembled at the bar. There were Gurkha and Baluch soldiers who were specially called in. The Sikh infantry was completely kept in the dark. And the fact that the whole massacre was a conspiracy was such shocking piece of information that when I read that, I was pretty determined that the world should know about this. That the world should know about this. And then I was kind of conscious of two things, that what we are doing in this film is we are being sensitive and we are being authentic because we are honoring the sacrifice of people who assembled at Jallianwala Bagh. We are honoring the sacrifice of people who passed away at Jallianwala Bagh. For me, they came to Jallianwala Bagh to celebrate Baisakhi and they left as martyrs. So
mm.
honoring their sacrifice was important, was key, and that is where we had to be very sensitive. And the second kind of a part, second kind of important thing that we had in mind is that we are honoring one of India's forgotten heroes, Sankaran Nair. You
True.
know, the world does not know about the legendary courtroom battle that he fought to just to bring the news of Jallianwala Bagh out in the open. So when we had two such strong pillars guiding us, there was no apprehension.
Right. Now, I'm gonna, so I don't mean to throw you under the bus here, but I think it will just be really interesting maybe to know your perspective because you've explored the subject so closely. Why do you think Shankaran Nair's story has been brushed under the carpet for so long? And again, a second part to this question as well. Do you feel that we as Indians were very hesitant and almost gaslit into actually not telling our story the way we should have? Like, for example, how you have with Jallianwala Bagh and the way even maybe Shujit Sarkar made Sardar Udham as well. Do you think now that we are kind of, as Indians, are now embracing that trauma that we faced because of colonialism and because of the partition as well?
Yeah, so it's shocking to me as well that why does the world not know about Shankar Nair's story? It's Jallianwala Bagh is mentioned in our textbooks, but there is just one paragraph on it, and I do not know the particular reasons, and I do not want to get into the politics of it, but it is kind of unfortunate that we do not know about this courtroom case. It's kind of unfortunate that we do not know the extent of evil that was perpetrated by the British Empire.
Yeah.
And maybe if I have to speculate, it's when the massacre took place, Anuj, when the massacre took place, and this is what the movie tries to throw light on also, is that the empire, right after the massacre, went into an overdrive in creating a narrative that the people at Jallianwala Bagh were armed and that they had and that they were terrorists, and they banned publication of all newspapers that were reporting the truth. There is a very beautiful poem called Khuni Baisakhi, which is written by one of the survivors
Hmm.
of Jallianwala Bagh massacre,
Yeah.
which was banned by the Britishers. So they didn't let the news come out. And unfortunately, even the proceedings of this case were not reported, because the case was also happening at a time when in the 1920s. We definitely live in a different world now. The major mouthpieces of the press was governed by the British Empire, by the crown.
Yeah.
So perhaps that is why the case was not given its due back then. And then we took a long time in understanding the magnitude of Shankar Nair's victory. In
Hmm.
fact, the book is written by Shankar Nair's great grandson, and funnily enough, they were also not completely aware of what their great grandfather had accomplished till they took a trip to Jallianwala Bagh. And close to Jallianwala Bagh, there's a museum, the Partition Museum, and that is where they came across their great grandfather's portrait. And from that portrait was the pivot for them to discover and dig deep into their great grandfather's story. So so I think it's just a hangover of the British Empire, the British media, them being the guardians or the gatekeepers of all information. And the trickle down effect of that was that we didn't know of this remarkable story.
Hmm.
Uh, but I am very glad that the story is out now in the open. I was thoroughly impressed by Shujit Sarkar's Sardar Udham, which
Yeah.
is was an inspiration to me, and which is a beautiful film. And I feel the more stories that come out which reflect the angst, the trauma, and also the heroism that our past contains, the better it is.
Hmm. It's no, I completely agree with you, and I think and I'm gonna come to your filmmaking in just a moment, but actually जब हम ऐसी फिल्म देखते हैं, I think history एक बहुत ही एक complex subject है, in a sense, because obviously historical accuracy को भी दर्शाना है, at the same time आपकी जो एक perspective as a filmmaker उसको भी दिखाना है फिल्म में.
Correct.
तो how did you create that balance between that historical accuracy and the sort of cinematic liberty, as they often say?
So for me, Anuj, I want to be very clear that for me, what was paramount is that, and one of my screenwriting heroes, Aaron Sorkin,
Yeah.
has famously said it, that movies on real life people or real life incidents are not meant to be photographs. They can be paintings. And when you paint, you have more latitude in creating a sense of drama, in compressing timeline, in creating characters. As long as you're true to the soul of the story that you're trying to say, you have the latitude in creating drama. So for me the movie is not a photograph or a documentary of that time. It captures the soul, and it paints the valor of Shankar Nair's story.
Mm.
It paints his bravery. So as far as creative liberties are concerned, I want to be absolutely clear. No creative liberties have been taken as far as the facts of the massacre are concerned.
Right.
So all the information relating to the fact that there were Gorkha and Baluch soldiers who fired upon their own people, the fact that an aeroplane flew over the Bagh, the fact that there was a fake curfew that was implemented just to label people as terrorists, the fact that the British indulged in a fake news narrative to hammer home the thought that people at Jallianwala Bagh were armed, the fact that the case had jury tampering. So we have not taken any creative liberties as far as the factual elements of the massacre, the factual elements of the case are concerned. In fact, in fact, General Dyer, and as you've seen the film now, General, we kind of explore his backstory,
Yeah.
where he was bullied at Bishop's Cotton School in Shimla and was called because he used to stammer. That is absolutely correct. That is absolutely true. In fact, there's something which we could not, because which we could not highlight in the film, is that after Dyer finished his education in India, he went to Ireland, and in military college he was ridiculed there
Hmm.
by his white college mates who called him a wild Indian. So General Dyer grew up with very complicated notions of what it means to be a military man, and and there's a complex persona to that evil man as well. So while we uh have, as I said, it's a painting of that time and not an accurate photograph, but we have been mindful and cognizant of not altering any of the historical facts.
Okay. What about that case? The one that where Ananya Pandey is cross-examining, that case that was supposed to frame Sankaran Nair. Was that also documented as well?
Yes, so there was this lady, her real name is Marcella Sherwood,
Okay.
and she claimed that she was assaulted, and the empire spun that assault to signify that there was a rebellion that was brewing in Amritsar, and had the empire not acted upon, and had the empire not fired at the protesters at Jallianwala Bagh, there would have been widespread chaos. Lot of English women would have been assaulted. So that comes from real history. The real figure's name is Marcella Sherwood, and so that was very key for us to dismantle and to poke holes
Hmm.
at that claim which the empire had put out.
Right. Now, I want to talk a bit about about the filmmaking part because honestly, it was it was so hauntingly, it was so chilling. Um, and I remember mentioning this to you as well, that I love the color schemes that you used here. There was almost like this pinkish shade to the sort of blues that you had in the film. Um, the only time where it goes very deep colors or very darker colors is obviously in the courtroom sequences, or if there is any other official kind of sequences, right? Or if there was the Jallianwala Bagh, in which obviously the red was a lot more prominent, obviously so to symbolize the blood. But I feel ये जो color schemes आपने use किया है वो एक राहत देती है. There's a sense of zen-like, almost a zen-like sort of a feeling, which kind of then contrasts to the absolute intensity that we are bludgeoned with. And I'm going to use the word bludgeoned here very tactfully because that's exactly what it felt like, because that's what happened. So what was your sort of idea of actually using these color schemes? And is this the sort of effect that you wanted to achieve from it in the film?
So, and here I give full credit to my DOP, Debojit Ray, who is master at his job. So, so the idea, so the idea for us was to achieve the last image, in the last image where Shankaran goes to the Gurudwara, and he lifts his hands up in gratitude. That's the place where the film goes warm. The film kind of, you see the kind of, warmth, the light, the positivity in kind of, that frame where he lifts his hands up and he folds his hands in gratitude. So we were consciously working towards that impact. So which is why if you see, the movie has a gradation
Yeah.
of, where it's very, very cooler tones, very, very grim, very somber, very melancholic, to use that word, because we wanted that last image to really hit you, hit to last image to really hit you, and so we kind of worked backwards. We kind of worked backwards to achieve that impact. And that apart, it was every scene guiding us. It was every scene, guiding us in terms of how Debo lit each and every scene. The which was, and full credit, complete credit to him, because he understood my script really well. He understood the motivations behind each and every move really well. And as I said, we wanted to achieve that last impact. We wanted to give you a sense of warmth there.
Hmm.
And that was us working backwards to achieve that.
Right. Now, obviously, what I also feel, what really jumped out at me as a cinema fan, whilst watching the film, is that it actually felt like a love letter to two filmmakers. Now, I don't know if this was conscious on your part or maybe it's just my observation, but it felt like a love letter to Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, and it also felt like a love letter to Steven Spielberg for Schindler's List. Uh,
It's You've got it spot on, because both of these filmmakers and both of these movies have been like have been inspirational to me. Steven, in fact, Oppenheimer released while we were filming Kesari Chapter Two.
oh,
So
interesting.
so that kind of is very subliminal. Our the similarities or to Oppenheimer, because that actually released while we were filming. And yeah, you're absolutely spot on, because Schindler's List is a huge inspiration in terms of even the character arc which Shankaran undertakes in the movie. Because Shankaran starts off as this British loyalist who believes that अदालत में सही और गलत का नहीं, सिर्फ हार और जीत का फैसला होता है.
जी.
To him then saying in the bar council scene that मुझे हमेशा लगता था कि अदालतों में हार और जीत का फैसला होता है, पर वो गलत है. अदालतों में सही और गलत का फैसला होना चाहिए.
Hmm.
So that kind of, that whole arc of Sankaran Nair from a British loyalist to the biggest patriot is kind of in some way inspired from Schindler's List. Also, Pargat's character is
Hmm.
kind of symbolic of that little girl in the red dress in from Schindler. So you've got it spot on. You've got
Yeah.
it spot on. In fact, while editing the film, we had the music of Schindler's List played a huge part. The background score of the film
Hmm.
was put at a lot of places while we were editing the film to give it that feel, that flow. And yeah, you're absolutely right. Schindler's List is one of the most beautiful films that's come out. And I'm glad, I'm touched, and I'm honored that you've said that. You're absolutely right. Steven Spielberg is one of my biggest heroes. And Christopher Nolan, he's lovely. He's lovely. In fact, I've loved Oppenheimer, and yeah, you can 100%. It's a love letter to both Christopher Nolan and Steven Spielberg.
Oh, I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm so glad. Gosh, this is the validation I think I needed
In,
to hear.
in fact, if you see the usage of background score, the way we have used background
Yes,
score in the movie
exactly.
is very Nolan-esque. Is
It
is very
is
is very Nolan-esque in building tension in courtroom scenes, in kind of the tension rising, 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 and
the
exploding.
crescendos.
Yeah, the crescendos. Yeah, yeah. You are absolutely spot on.
And
And I've loved Oppenheimer. And the beauty of Oppenheimer is that it's such a verbose film, just like Kesari Chapter Two, but it does not feel verbose. It makes you feel. It hits you in the gut.
I mean, a big statement for me to make, but I personally prefer Kesari to Oppenheimer. So
Oh,
this is
oh,
my opinion, putting it out there. But no,
oh.
the reason why I say that is because, see, number one, this film is kind of it's like I said, it's a human story, right? And I think it was a story that needed to be told. And I'm just so glad that India, as like I mentioned in my review as well, that it's finally getting the courage to tell its story. I think it's about high time it did that. Now, I watched this movie some time ago called The Kashmir Files.
Sorry. On courage, I like to say something. It
Yeah.
was very important for us to have the fuck you in the film, because for us, it's the whole point was to look Britishers in the eye and say fuck you for what they've done. So that is the courage, and that is the courage which we imbibed from Sankaran Nair's story, and that is the courage which we wanted to depict.
I think that's where my question about historical context was actually coming from because I wasn't sure where the origins of that term was from.
So the term was originated in the 16th century.
Oh, okay, fine. So it was well established.
We did our research. We did our, speaking to historians. So yeah. So we did that background check.
Right. No, amazing. So as I was saying earlier, that basically I watched Kashmir Files, and honestly, everything aside from the film, just talking about the story and the pain that it depicts, uh, I was left absolutely deeply moved at the end. I don't know if you've seen the film or not, but in the end, it completely just showcases the brutality. It showcases the back and forth of today's day and age, the past, and then it ends up being in the past and how brutally the people were brutally killed. And even though we weren't not kind of we knew about it, but we got to visibly see it. And for me, the Jallianwala Bagh scene, um I honestly I cannot even find words right now, even as I do this interview, to kind of describe it because it broke me inside. It broke me inside. Just I think there's this one sequence where the people are basically trying to break free from the gates, and like people are literally falling on top of each other. And Bargat is trapped. You can see his hand. Oh my goodness, I'm literally getting emotional and goosebumps as I'm describing it. But uh, the feeling that I'm getting just as a spectator, as a viewer, I cannot even imagine how it was like for you as filmmakers to really picturize that. How would you articulate the emotions and the way you went about it?
So for me, Jallianwala Bagh has been depicted on screen in Gandhi, in Sardar Udham, in Rang De Basanti, and these movies have done a fabulous job. So for us, it was a big challenge into how do we depict it and still make people move, still make people have the experience that you are having. And one call that was taken early on, and I'm very proud of that call, is that we wanted to show the massacre from a boy's point of view. We were okay if we don't show the scale of the massacre, but we wanted the audiences to feel what would it be like had they been at Jallianwala Bagh.
Hmm.
Which is why our massacre is told from Pargat's point of view. Our massacre is that family, one family getting torn apart by by the massacre. So I think once we zeroed down on that approach, everything just fell in place. Everything just fell in place. So we are so that kind of approach is what made the massacre scene visceral, palpable, and claustrophobic. Because we wanted you to be in the place of Pargat. We wanted the audiences to be in the place of Pargat. And and it was heart-wrenching to shoot it. It was tough, but I would not spend time in talking about how challenging it was, because what about the people who were there? So it's just we were honored that we were kind of, we got the chance to say the story on screen.
Hmm.
And and it was yeah, I just thinking about those days fills me with a sense of pride.
But you know what though? It's difficult, isn't it? Because number one, you're making a film. So this was just a retelling of it, right? ये सिर्फ एक फिल्म थी. आप जिस तरह से वो
Correct.
दिखा रहे थे वो एक obviously
Correct.
सेट था, एक्टर्स थे उसमें. लेकिन फिर भी एक डाइकोटमी जरूर होगी, एक क्या कहते हैं, कश्मकश जरूर होगी आपके दिमाग में. बिकॉज एक तो यो काइंड ऑफ सेट के अच्छा ये फिल्म बना रहे हैं हम, लेकिन ये लोगों के साथ हुआ है. How did you deal with that dilemma though, Karan? That's what I want to know because I feel like it must be it's important to address it, because I feel like, we often say that yeah, it was mechanical, whatever, because that's what shooting is. It's always like this scene, that scene, next scene.
In fact, I would say it was not mechanical at all. It was emotion driving each and every shot in that scene.
Right.
It was emotion driving, emotion telling us what to do. In fact, to give a small example, there's this shot where Pargat walks with his sister's body, and he's just walking, and the bag is strewn with bodies. It's littered with dead bodies all around him. We were losing light. Technically, it's not the best shot, but we didn't care. because the emotion was spot on. And I still remember there were people on the set who were in tears. They were these action stuntmen who are supposed to be strong, muscular men, and I
Hmm.
saw them weeping. I just saw them crying. So that was the impact of that scene, of that shoot. And we didn't, after a point of time, technicalities went out of the window. We were just following the emotion beat by beat.
Hmm.
And it was, yeah, it's something that I will never ever forget in my life.
Right. No, absolutely. No, very well said. And I'm glad you've done it. But I think, like you mentioned, we've had Sardaruddam, we've had Gandhi, we've had Rang De Basanti, three brilliantly captured, cinematically very beautifully. I don't even know if the word beautifully is the right word, but very visually shot. Um, for you, what would you say was your voice? I think in terms of representing it your way, and because I think and the reason why I say this because it's so easy, isn't it? When you're so heavily inspired by something, when you're so deeply moved by something, in a way, you kind of subconsciously try to not emulate that, but you kind of adapt into that very easy. I mean, I don't know. That's how I feel as a person. But for you, what was that individual distinctive voice that you think really drove you or helped you?
So as far as the massacre sequences are concerned, as I said, the first original distinctive voice is to show the massacre from the boys' point of view, because even in Sardaruddam, in Gandhi, and Rang De Basanti, that's not been attempted.
Hmm.
So we were very conscious that this is Pargat's story, that we are showing you this boy's family getting killed in front of his eyes, and and this boy's visceral experience in the Bagh. So that's, and the second time when the massacre sequence comes in the movie, it was the intercutting. It was a juxtaposition of Sankaran Nair receiving knighthood and Pargat's life getting blown apart.
Yeah.
So it was the juxtaposition of British grandeur and the extent of the evil. So it was a juxtaposition of the highest crowning moment in Shankaran's life and the most devastating moment in Pargat's life, and the fact that these two lives are going to collide. So it's these two approaches that kind of, I believe, sets these two approaches, which is, I believe, it distinguishes our massacre sequences from the other great films that you spoke about.
Right. I think also I want to chime in here the Teri Mitti sequence. I mean, whoa. I mean, whoa. Like there's actually here another camera shot that really stuck with me. Okay, it's the whole setup of the scene where he's literally wearing a very typical British attire. Akshay Kumar is wearing a very typical British attire. He's he's absorbing the scene and the sort of where the massacre happens. He looks into the well and there's like a corner shot where you can see his reflection in the water of the well. I mean, wow. Seriously, wow.
Yeah, that was Shankaran, the final moment before Shankaran decides to transform and wear the kala and take the crown on. When he
Yeah.
was looking at his own reflection in the well, he was looking back at his life, looking back at all the times when he was the lawyer for the British Empire, and and he didn't like what he saw in that well, and he wanted to make amends. So when you see, when he turns around, there's a bit of anger in which he says the next few lines. It's it's anger at the British Empire, at what they have done, but it is also anger at himself for having been their loyal servant until this time. So, and I feel Akshay sir has performed that scene beautifully, beautifully. And thank you for picking out that sequence, because him looking at his own reflection one final time was key, was very important.
Right. Now, this is interesting because Maddie, I know is probably one of the most patriotic people you'll ever meet. And obviously Akshay sir, of course, has had this sort of ability of making films which are of patriotic nature for sure. I mean, Kesari 1 was incredible. I think that Teri Mitti then also was very was very soul stirring, and so is this one. When I saw that whole tussle between them two in the courtroom scenes, it
Yeah.
reminded me of Veer Das's speech about there being two Indias. You have one who deeply cares about the people, who deeply care about the country that they come from, and the second one, you have obviously like people who don't necessarily, who basically even now till date seek validation from the West and are basically the lard subs of today's day and age, who are still under the suppression of the British, you know?
In fact, here I would like to say that there's a nuance in Madison's character in Neville McKinley,
Yeah,
which is that he was never a Lard Sahab of the Britishers. He
right.
was somebody who was out on his own mission to take down Sankaran Nair. So he was actually a victim of the divide and rule policy of the Britishers. So when Madison and I were discussing the character of Neville McKinley,
Yeah.
there was a day when we zeroed down on one thought that he is not defending the crown, he is out there to defeat Sankaran Nair.
Thank you for saying that.
And
Okay.
when a fight, a battle becomes personal, you leave no stone unturned. Then all bets are off. And I feel Madison brought that out beautifully. So he was never somebody who was doing it to get some brownie points from the empire. He didn't care about the Britishers.
Hmm.
He didn't care about General Dyer. He just wanted to see Shankar Nair lose. and
Hmm.
and I think that's the nuance that a great actor like R. Madhavan
Hmm.
brought out. You know,
Yeah. Oh,
so
he was amazing. Yeah.
so that was beautiful. So Shankar Nair was a man who was out there to get justice for his own people. Maddie Sir was somebody out there to get justice for the hurt that he felt,
Yeah.
that he had endured in his past. So, which is what made the battle more visceral, more palpable. These two men going against each other.
But that's what I was trying to say though. It's because we've had these sort of sentiments against one another anyway, and the British have
Yeah.
capitalized. So see, just
Yeah.
because he might not be a defender of the crown, he was still
Yeah.
telling the wrong side of history for his own
Correct.
selfish
Correct.
reasons.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. It's kind of symbolic of how the Britishers have always in the
I
past pitted us against each other, pitted us against each other.
And it
Yeah.
and it still happens to this day, by the way, let me tell you.
Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
as NRIs, like I don't know, as someone who's an NRI, मैं वो देख रहा था and I was just like भाई साहब मतलब ये अभी भी होता है ये सब चीजें. It
Correct.
happens even today. But no, I think that was really brilliant. But I think my main question really was that obviously Akshay sir and Mary sir are deeply patriotic. They love India, right? And so does Ananya as well, of course. I mean, everyone on the set loves India. I mean, needless to say. But I think when they were kind of having this tussle, right? For them to kind of be caught up in these emotions, I mean, regardless of which side, what was the main grounding point for them as the actors, in terms of approaching this with a very human approach, but also yet having that sense of power within the realms of their characteristics?
So for Akshay sir, it was actually he just imbibed the character of Shankar Nair beautifully. So for him, it was understanding who Shankar Nair was as a person, which is where the discussions that I had with him, the fact that he also read the book on which a script is based on, the innumerable script reading sessions that we had with Akshay sir, where he asked questions, he probed, he had suggestions to make on each and every scene. So over the course of those sessions, he was making the character his own. So for Akshay sir, it was just understanding who Shankaran Nair was, and for Maddie sir, the grounding. Maddie sir is such a fantastic actor. For him, the grounding came from, as I mentioned previously, in understanding this subtle difference that he's out on his own personal mission to take Shankar Nair down. And I'm blessed to have worked with two powerhouses. You should have been on set when we shot those scenes when the two of them were going against each other. There were literal fireworks in that courtroom.
Right. We were not fortunate enough to be there. So if you could actually kind of maybe describe it to us, that would be wonderful, please.
Oh, it was just the two of them going at each other, the two of them improvising. That scene where Sankaran Nair offers Martha water. He walks in, just offers a water. That is Akshay sir improvising, because he had seen Maddie sir give Martha a glass of water to ease her down. So
Yes.
after Ananya has a crowning moment, Akshay sir just came up with the idea that even he'll walk and give Martha a glass of water. So it was a rivalry playing out beautifully.
Yeah.
So, and there were numerous instances where the two of them brought their own personalities, brought their own experiences to play. And yeah, and I think that's the heart of our film.
Mhm.
Shankar Nair versus Neville McKinley is the heart and soul
Yeah.
of the narrative.
No, definitely. But I also have to say, Ananya really did well. I mean, Akshay sir was outstanding, by the way, especially in the final sequences. I mean, seriously. I mean, I think this was a side to him he really wanted to see for a long time. And I think I'm glad he didn't indulge in stereotypical heroics just to kind of get the perspective across, you know? And you didn't even fall for the typical sort of filmy sort of template in terms of, telling the story. And I'm glad you stood,
No,
you,
we were very certain that we are honoring Shankar Nair's life and character.
yeah.
So, and that was a touchstone.
Yeah, for sure. Now, Ananya was a surprise package, I think. I think the way she kind of cross-examines was very powerful. There was moments where I think she very much was confident and has definitely displayed a growth. But besides the obvious reason, what do you think was the main aspect for you of having her on board as Dilpreet? And what is it about her as an artist that you felt that she could really bring to the table, and
So,
why she was competent enough to do it?
so she is one. Uh, there's a very vulnerable side to Ananya,
True.
which there is this sense of vulnerability which she carries, and at the same time she has her steely side as well. So there's this mix that you get of her being vulnerable and also her being very strong. And I needed both these characteristics to come into play for Dilreet, because when she goes and she stops Shankar Nair at the railway station from getting onto the train, it's she comes from a position of vulnerability, which while she's talking, while she's pestering, while she's persuading, just transitions into a position of strength. And that I think she has uh, she has in her own self as a person a very vulnerable side and a side that is very strong.
Hmm.
And 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 I think she's done remarkably well in the film.
Hmm.
She's been very hardworking. She's done dialect classes for over a year to get the Punjabi diction right. She's spoken to some of my friends who are lawyers to understand the court mannerisms right. But for me, it's her vulnerability and her strength.
Hmm.
Vulnerability and a steely resolve, and the beating heart that she has,
Hmm.
which kind of helped me create this character with her.
I think now, like as I mentioned in my introduction as well, like India is telling its own story now. We're not needing a foreign filmmaker to tell our story in their way. We're taking that own responsibility, and I think that's why for me, Kesari 2 is a big win because through the mainstream space, it is actually showing the British for what they were, and that was brutes. They were brutes. There's no other two ways. They were almost demonic. Like I think it was so chilling with the way uh I think there was a scene where I think Akshay and Simon, who plays General Dyer, they're sort of talking, and he basically mentions about, oh, you got one thing right about me though, and the way he goes into this really dark perspective, it is scary. I mean, even today, I think I watched Satnam Sanghera's like documentary about partition, and I think he had interviewed General Dyer's granddaughter, great granddaughter or something, someone of their family, and the way she was smiling, and actually, I mean, it is absolutely bone chilling, Karan. Um, so I think in terms of seeing this and the fact that we had Chava as well again that released just earlier, What do you think has given Indian cinema that strength? I mean, even the fact that we had RRR as well, which again shows the British as brutes as they were. What do you think has given us this strength, do you think, in terms of storytelling? And going forward, how do you think this strength can actually now manifest into more compelling storytelling, which is could also perhaps make a very significant change in the mainstream cinema way of storytelling as well?
See, I feel what has given us this strength is actually very tough to answer. And I feel subconsciously it is India's rise, India's rise in the world. Our global stature has increased, our soft power has really increased. So it's subconsciously India's rise in the world. It's a rise of a new modern India where we don't hesitate in championing what's right.
Mm,
In it's subconsciously, I think it's a trickle down effect of India's position in the world. And as far as this story is concerned, and I can speak from my personal example,
yeah,
that when I read about what the empire did, General Dyer shot down innocent people. And for the empire, for the government, for the crown to label those innocent people as terrorists and to then run and employ their entire machinery in protecting General Dyer, when the easiest thing would be to hold him accountable,
yeah,
dismiss him, sentence him for punishment. But the entire crown deployed their efforts in protecting him, in labeling innocent people as terrorists, in labeling children as terrorists. So that was bone chilling.
yeah.
That was bone chilling. There's this famous poet which we have read his poems, Rudyard Kipling. He
Mm,
wrote an article. General Dyer saved the Indian Empire. There was a pension fund which was set up for General Dyer in the UK. So, so just these facts, and you're absolutely right. Caroline Dyer's interview, where she's smiling and she's saying that that General Dyer was loved by the Indians. He spoke 4 languages, and she's labeling a survivor as of the massacre as a looter. Now, those things anger me.
yeah.
Those things I can't even put it into words. So from a very personal point of view, I really wanted the world to know the extent of evil that was perpetrated by the British Empire. Because as I mentioned, they deployed their entire machinery in protecting the worst military officer of the crown. So
Yes.
so so personally, I that's the reason why I wanted this story to be out there.
Hmm. And it's very telling of today's day and age. What's happening in the world, particularly in the Middle East. I mean, it's dictatorship, and even today, like innocent lives are being lost because of dictatorship. And I think that's why for me, this really did not feel like the past at all.
Yeah.
It's almost like the
For me,
shadow is chasing us.
it was very important that our film, even though it's a period film, it should speak to the present. And I feel you're absolutely right that we are living in an era where innocent lives are being lost all around us, where governments indulge in building fake narratives, where innocent artists are put behind bars for
Hmm.
just their words and their thoughts.
Hmm.
And it's scary times. And this is one thing which Akshay sir and I keep discussing, that one nation's trauma can be and ought to be another nation's lesson.
True.
So Jallianwala Bagh was our trauma, colonialism was our trauma, and and the world should take that as a lesson.
For sure. No, definitely. I think, look, Kesari 2 is a very heavy film. It's a very heavy film. It's a need of the hour, of course. But I think now for the course of your career, Karan, as a filmmaker, because usually films like this, I would say typically, would come at a point in a filmmaker's journey once they've made a few films, once they've, gotten into the stream of things, they've kind of had a bit of they've learned the tricks of the trade, and then they kind of delve into this because they have that confidence too. But now that you've already sort of surpassed those steps and have made this as your first one, what direction do you hope or do you aspire for your filmmaking journey to go into now?
See, first movies are tough, and first movies are like your first love.
Yeah,
So I I hope I hope that I can garner the same love in my next film as well. The love that I've received, the respect that I've received is heartwarming. I'm just I take all of this love as a responsibility, and yeah, I'm working, I'm writing my next film, which which I hope people like and people love it as much as they have loved this film. But I want to tell stories which kind of are very human at their core, which have a sense of drama, and which are in some way reflective of this beautiful country that we are living in.
absolutely. No, for sure. I'm assuming that your next film will probably be a bit of a stark difference to how Kesari 2 was, right?
It's too early to say anything about the next film.
यार थोड़ा सा एक्सक्लूसिव हमें भी दे दो यार
But genuinely, I'm still writing it, so it's too early.
No, no, no. But look, may you continue. I hope that that it really transpires into something beautiful. But I think Karan, you're a very wonderful filmmaker. And I
Thank
think
you so much. Thank you,
it
Anuj.
was such a, like I said to you before earlier in this interview, that it is a big responsibility of making a film of this nature. But you have done so very much competently, and I think I'm very proud of this film because this is not just about Jallianwala Bagh. This is about our legacy. The fact that we also have Waking of a Nation on Sony Live, Ram Madhavani series, which is again a very masterfully adaptation on this similar topic actually. And I'm just so happy that Indian cinema, like I said, is finding that inner courage and it's saying enough is enough. And I think the time is definitely now, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Anuj,
Yeah.
for your questions, for this interview, for your love for the film. It's very heartwarming. It fills me with a sense of gratitude, and I'm just so happy.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anuj. Thank you.